Good morning. Thanks for joining this session on hydrogen. It will be not the only one during the conference on this topic that is gaining a lot of attention. Today we are going to have 4 presentations on this topic, and mainly some scenarios on the medium term and most of them the long term. So 2050 is one of the dates that is going to be discussed. So we'll have 4 presentations. Some of them are going to deal with France and others with Europe. So on this last topic, so I think that Jefferson is going to present the model that is a joint work with a lot of people. So I leave him to explain the context of the model that is going to be detailed and the results for the scenarios 2050. So just before giving the floor to Jefferson, you have the instructions for the session in the chat. We will proceed with presenters with 20 minutes, followed by questions. Or if there are a clarifying question, I think that it will be useful also to perhaps ask them during the talk quite quickly. That's it. Jefferson, the floor is yours.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I can share my screen?
Yes.
Perfect.
Perfect. We're looking at it, Jefferson.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Jefferson. I'm a PhD student at the TU Berlin, and I'll be presenting on the global hydrogen markets for 2050. So just a very quick background. So today, currently, the majority of hydrogen production, at least 95% of it, comes from fossil fuels. And it's primarily through methane steam reformation of natural gas and coal. This is primarily used directly on site and for the purpose of ammonia production or oil refining. To date, there isn't any significant hydrogen production from renewables. However, one thing to consider is that hydrogen is incredibly versatile. We can utilize it for fuel for transportation, for heating, to produce e-fuels, and for energy storage. So as a result of this, the global demand for hydrogen is expected to increase, and renewables can potentially facilitate that production worldwide. So with different countries trying to produce hydrogen, there's a significant potential for trade. So in terms of international trade, the Asian market will likely be the largest consumer of hydrogen, and that can potentially open doors for exporting countries with low-cost electricity and high capacity factors. Specifically, countries like Australia, at least the south of Australia, has significant renewable generation capacity and limited interconnection with the rest of the country. So it's a prime area to produce hydrogen, and as a result, Australia has made plans to export to Japan, South Korea, China, and Singapore once its facilities are up and running. The other part of the world, you have Chile, which leverages one of the best solar resources in the world. It has low cost and high capacity renewables potential in the Atacama Desert, and that can translate to low cost hydrogen production for Asia. In Europe, you have Norway, which has the potential to produce hydrogen from hydropower, offshore wind, but also from natural gas through methane steam reformation. And also Norway has the idea of trading this hydrogen with the Asian market itself. And then lastly, countries such as Saudi Arabia, you have complementary wind and solar resources to generate hydrogen in different parts of the country, and it's potentially to be transported as ammonia. Now, one fun fact is that Saudi Arabia exported the first shipment ever of carbon neutral ammonia to Japan, and this is like a very important realization for the hydrogen economy for both countries. So one thing to consider is that everything I've just mentioned is very much speculation based on the resource potentials available in these countries. And as a result of that, it's precisely why we want to have a global hydrogen model to be able to test this, to be able to see if these assumptions are actually true. So what we did was we developed the first iteration of GH2 model, so our version of the global hydrogen model. And it's a static model of the year 2050. It's deterministic, so it assumes perfect information, and it aggregates the world into 10 regions. And it allows for the transportation of hydrogen as liquid and gas. It includes market power, and it models different players along the hydrogen value chain. Specifically, those players are depicted here. You have the producer, who essentially can sell the hydrogen to the trader, and then the trader sells the hydrogen to the local demand node, or it can also ship it abroad to another country or a different region via pipelines to meet the demand there. The producer can also sell to the liquefier, who liquefies the hydrogen and then ships it to a regasifier in a different region via a shipping vessel, and then that regasifier sells it to its local demand. So each of these players essentially is modeled as a profit maximizing problem. And here we have the problem for the producer, in this case, electrolysis. Essentially, the producer is trying to maximize the difference between its revenue and its production costs, and it's subject to a capacity constraint, which dictates the upper bound on the amount of hydrogen that can be produced in that given year. We can also have constraints that restrict total production due to governmental limits, so that's equation 3, and this is production ceiling essentially. And then we also have the non-negativity constraints of the sales. We would want them to be positive. And then we also have the market clearing condition, which states that the producer sales must be less than or equal to the purchases made from its trader and the sum purchases of its liquefiers. And it's this market clearing condition that that establishes the market clearing price that the liquefiers and the traders pay to the producer. So we have the same optimization problem under constraints and market clearing conditions for all other players, and we also have them for the player that is the producer, but it's producing via SMR. So what we do to solve this problem is we reformulate all the players' problems as a mixed complementarity problem by taking the KKT conditions of each player. And then, for example, here we have the negative, we have the sum of the negative price plus the cost plus two dual variables, alpha and beta. Alpha is related to the capacity constraint, which represents the break-even rents for additional capacity, and then the dual variable beta relates to the production ceiling. And then we have here it's it's just the constraints that we had on the previous slide here, related to the specific dual variable and the market clearing again. So for each player, we collected extensive data on technologies, the cost, the demand, the infrastructure for our specific target year 2050. So here for the producer, we have hydrogen producing capacities, and these were obtained from model outputs of Genesis Mod, which is a global energy systems model developed by colleagues at TU Berlin. So what we see here is that before 2050, we have SMR and electrolysis capacities for each region, and we see that electrolysis capacity is significantly larger than SMR. The largest electrolysis and total producing regions are the rest of Asia, China, and India. And in terms of production costs, we derived estimates using IAEA and equations found in Hauser et al. And Brandl et al. And production via electrolysis is generally more expensive than that by SMR. That's the case for all regions except for China, India, and Africa. And what we have is that the highest cost for both electrolysis and SMR is found in rest of Asia, and the lowest costs are China for electrolysis and, not surprisingly, the Middle East for SMR. So other model inputs are liquefaction and regasification capacities and costs, total transportation costs, including the shipping vessels and the pipelines. And we also take into account loss rates along the value chain. So we ran the model considering perfect competition and market power, and these are the results that I'm going to present now. So for perfect competition, we have a global hydrogen demand of 634 million tons for the year of 2050. And most regions, what we see is that they're meeting their demand with local production. The rest of Asia, however, relies heavily on Chinese hydrogen imports. And you can see that here. And nearly half of its demand is met with imports from China. And then on the other hand, you have Europe, where it's relying on the former Soviet Union and Africa to meet its hydrogen demand. And again, it's also the case that half of its demand is met with imports from these two countries. So on the production side of things, what we're seeing is that the rest of Asia and Europe are the sole importers, and Africa, China, and former Soviet Union are the exporters. And nearly 2/3 of hydrogen production comes from electrolysis, with the remaining coming from SMR. So here we have the network, essentially with our regions. And again, each region, well, at least most of the regions, are meeting their own hydrogen demand. So we have isolated systems: North America, South America, the Middle East, India, and Oceania. So the results for market power are a little bit more interesting. So what we see for market power is that we have a global hydrogen demand of 520 million tons for 2050, and of which China, Africa, and the rest of Asia, they account for 50% of the global demand. And if we look at how the demand is met, it's what we're seeing is that there's significantly more trading happening with market power than there is with perfect competition. What initially happens is that the global demand is reduced by 20%, and India's demand is cut in half. In the perfect competition case, what we were seeing was that the demand for India was close to China's. So here's India in perfect competition, and then in market power. What we're also seeing is that Africa's hydrogen is penetrating different markets. So in the perfect competition case, you have it selling primarily to Europe, or only to Europe, but now it's also selling to the Middle East and to the former Soviet Union. One thing that we're noticing is that other regions are also starting to sell to other markets as well. However, North America, South America, India, and Oceania still remain isolated. Another difference between market power and perfect competition is that with market power, Europe is relying significantly more on exports to meet the hydrogen demand, specifically it's relying more on imports to meet the hydrogen demand, and specifically imports from Africa. So in the perfect competition case, Europe with its own production met at least half of its demand, but now it's only meeting a very small percentage. So this is now the network that we developed under market power. And essentially what we're seeing here is that, again, there's significantly more trading between the countries. However, specifically, we're seeing two big trading factions occurring here. So we have the flow from the Middle East into Africa, Europe, and former Soviet Union, and you have this faction here in Asia between China and the rest of Asia. What we're also noticing, however, is that despite there being more trade between different countries or the different regions, there isn't any trade in liquid hydrogen. And this is attributed to high cost of liquefaction, high cost of regasification, but also the high cost of shipping. On the production side, what we're seeing is that right off the bat, that China's production accounts for nearly a fourth of the global hydrogen production. And what we're also seeing is that that countries are taking advantage of external hydrogen prices so that they are strategically importing and exporting hydrogen from the same regions. So essentially the need or the desire to trade depends primarily on the regional prices and also the production capacities available within the country itself. And then in terms of prices, comparing the perfect competition case with the market power case, one thing what we're seeing, which is not surprising, is that under market power, you generally have higher prices. All regions except for Europe and Asia, they have a much higher market power price than the perfect competition price. And then when you take the weighted average of the global price of hydrogen, what we're seeing is for market power, it's $3.36 per kilogram, compared to the perfect competition case, which is $2.72 per kilogram. So essentially, there's a 25% markup when you have market power compared to perfect competition. So essentially, these are our preliminary results for our model. But what we are trying to do now is we're trying to expand the model to have a multi-period framework. Specifically, we want to incorporate more years starting from 2020, and we also want to include seasonality throughout the year. And then a big topic of discussion currently is the storage of hydrogen and also the transportation of hydrogen. So what we want to include is also storage operators. We also want to include the movement of or the transportation of hydrogen as ammonia. So ammonia transportation is very important given the fact that it's potentially much cheaper than shipping liquid hydrogen because of the added energy density that ammonia has compared to hydrogen, liquid hydrogen. So by modeling the transportation of ammonia, what we have to also do is add two additional players. So a hydrogenator, which converts the hydrogen into ammonia, and then the dehydrogenator, who converts the ammonia back into hydrogen. And then the other thing that we want to do is we want to spatially disaggregate some of the regions. So in our current model, we have only 10 regions, but we want to disaggregate those regions to have more granular results. Pretty much we want to explore, for example, flows within regions of Europe. So we also want to see the role of market power by large hydrogen producing countries. So countries such as Saudi Arabia or Australia. These are potentially countries that will produce a lot of hydrogen, see their role if they have market power and how they would potentially affect the hydrogen market or the prices. So once we do that, our hydrogen economy would look pretty much like this. So now you not only have the traders and the producers and the liquefiers, you have the hydrogenators as well. So the producer would also sell to the hydrogenator. The hydrogenator sells it to a dehydrogenator in another country, and it ships it via shipping vessels. But you also have the trader selling to the storage operator, and then the storage operator can strategically sell it to the market at a different time period. So this is essentially where we want to go with moving forward with our model, and essentially that's everything I have to present for you guys. If you guys have any questions.
Excellent, perfectly on time. Are there any questions? In the meantime, I'm going to start. I was curious about the question of market power. Why did you think that is an issue, one of the first issues that you wanted to explore So which is the basically the idea that you have behind, or the driver that you're going to point out in terms of who and why there is this vulnerability to market power?
So currently, there isn't that much hydrogen production in the world, so the market isn't really developed. So what we want to make sure is to include different cases. I just realized that my camera wasn't on. Apologies. So we want to make sure that we want to include different cases because we don't know exactly how the market is going to develop. That being said, with market power, at least what we're seeing in different markets, for example, the natural gas market, we see that you potentially have price differentials that occur, or price increases as a result of market power. So some big producing countries, they are able to strategically manipulate the prices or alter the prices, and that's at least important, at least in terms of hydrogen, given the fact that hydrogen is already a very expensive. It's going to be a potentially expensive energy source. So we want to also capture that as well.
So you identify the producer with a country for the moment. So the actor is the country, because I mean your view is quite aggregate, right?
Can you repeat that? I couldn't hear it.
So the source of market power, when I say market power, is market power by the producer country.
So it would be by the trader. It's the trader. So the trader would have in the equation, it would have a variational conjecture equation or parameter that would take into account either market power or not.
Okay.
And then yeah.
Thank you. Other questions or remarks? You can also write them down in the chat. If not, thank you very much, Jefferson, and all the team that has worked on this model. And we are going to switch to the second presentation by Alberto de la Cruz. Good morning.
Hi to everyone. Good morning. I will try to share my screen. So just let me know if everything works correctly. Yeah, thanks, Diego. So hi to everyone. This is Alberto Tejeda. I work for Rathje, the French TSO, the transmission system for operator for electricity, and I'm here to present you the paper, the study of where we analyze the transition to low carbon hydrogen, the benefits and challenges for the electricity system by 2030. First, I would like to start with the research framework. So this paper is a part of the work program of new end uses of electricity carried out by Rathje, the French TSO, as I said before, in the recent last years. We carry out a study of electricity mobility impacts on the electricity system, published in 2019, and I think there will be a presentation in the conference. A study of hydrogen production by electrolysis, the object of this presentation, and also another study of the heating in the building sector in collaboration with ADEME, which is the National Agency for Energy Efficiency, which has been published this year, and I think there will be also a presentation in these days. Secondly, this study is part of the National Hydrogen Plan published by the government in 2018 by responding to the Energy Minister's request regarding the services that electrolyzers can provide to the power system. And the results of the framework are consistent with the France hydrogen strategy recently published in September 2020. Third, finally, this work contributes to the global work and consultation of the energy mix 2050 scenarios carried out by Rathje, which will be published at the end of 2021. And this is a huge study aiming to analyze the function of the electricity system and energetic system in Europe by 2050, taking into account the electricity mix and all the demand side of the electricity system. I will continue with the state of the art on some perspectives of this study. First, let me give like a glimpse of how hydrogen is consumed today, because nowadays we talk a lot of hydrogen. We think of hydrogen for fuel cells in mobility or for storage, but let's see how hydrogen is consumed today. Is 60% in France, at least, consumed for oil refining, for petrol and diesel. Is 25% used for ammonia and fertilizers, 10% for chemicals, 1% for metallurgy, and the rest is used for other things. Now that we know how hydrogen consumption is done, let's see how it's produced. So most of it, 95% of hydrogen is produced from fossil fuels. Most part of it from steam reforming, which is high carbon intensity. So it produces a lot of CO2 when we produce hydrogen from steam reforming. So what we look nowadays in order to reduce emission is how can we substitute this production with a low carbon hydrogen. I have to say that in France, hydrogen production results in emissions of total close to 10 million tons a year, which represents 2 to 3% of the country's total emissions. So the first challenge of hydrogen is to reduce these carbon emissions for these industrial applications. There is another use of hydrogen, as I said before. We think of it like a storage for the electric system. It's the concept of the power to gas power. So we can imagine that we use the electricity to produce hydrogen thanks to electrolysis, and then this hydrogen we can do two things. For producing back to electricity. Either we use it in fuel cells, which are going to produce electricity, and we inject it back to the system. Either we use the hydrogen in the gas sector, we can put directly the hydrogen in the pipes with some limits, or we can convert hydrogen to methane and use it then as synthetic methane as another gas. And this gas can be used by power plants and combined cycle gas turbines, for instance, to produce electricity back to the system. From a technical point of view, the power to gas to power electricity storage solution is penalized by the efficiency. You can see here the efficiency is from 25 to 35%. So this is not a very good point for storage, but this good reason to explore its long-term potential, particularly for providing seasonal storage in electricity mixes with a high percentage of variable renewable sources, because hydrogen and methane can be stored for a long time, so this can be interesting for seasonal storage. So we have presented how can we decarbonize the end uses of hydrogen? How can we use hydrogen for energy storage? These two reasons are often confused, which are quite different, as we have just said. First, we have the first use of hydrogen today. The first challenge is to decarbonize gas uses or mobility. This will help us to meet international decarbonization targets in sectors which have emissions hard to abate, like heavy mobility, or, as I said before, steel production. This is what we call power to X. And then we have the use of X to power, which can help us to achieve supply-demand balance of the power system, offering a storage discharge solution. This can be of interest, but we see it as a long-term solution, not for the next decade, but later on. So the focus of the study in the focus horizon is 2035. we have analyzed that there is no absolute need for seasonal storage in France for this date, for this year, for that horizon. Sorry, there is a clear interest in the decarbonization the hydrogen used in industry, replacing natural gas steam reforming, and there is also a potential use of hydrogen for heavy mobility. So now we have said that we are going to produce this hydrogen. Of course, it has to be low carbon, otherwise there is no reason to produce hydrogen from methane if it is going to emit more emissions. So there are two main solutions, technical solutions, mature solutions to produce low carbon hydrogen. On the left-hand side, we have the steam methane reforming or gasification of coal coupled with carbon capture, which we can capture the CO2, so it does not emit to the atmosphere. This is the solution that is foreseen in Germany. It will play a role for economic reasons. In France, the national strategy for climate is it requires a limited use of carbon capture solutions because of technical and economic feasibility and also acceptability. On the right-hand side, we have the other technology, which is the production of hydrogen from electrolysis from the power system, either from renewables or of low carbon electricity as nuclear. This can be done either in local production in the countries, in France, for instance, with different operation schemes. Either can be imparted from another areas, as we just saw in the previous presentation, quite interesting. So this right-hand side of the slide is the electrolysis production is the France choice, and our scope of the study is the local production from electrolysis. So let's pass to the methods of the study and some main results. So what we have done to analyze the production of electrolysis from the electric system. So we have focused on different modes of hydrogen production from electrolysis, different operation modes. We have used the Antares software, which is used to simulate the operation of the European power system at an hourly level. So in input, we have different electricity mix scenarios with nuclear renewables. We have as well electrolysis development scenarios with different operation modes of electrolysis. We put it in the software, which is going to simulate the power system hour by hour in order to meet the demand and to select the different power generation system, which is going to be production at each hour. And at the end, we can analyze the different operations modes of the electrolyzers from 3 points of view: the technical impacts, the environmental concerns, and the economic issues. So let's present now the 3 operation modes that we have analyzed in this report. Now first, we have analyzed what is going to happen if we operate electrolyzers only during periods of marginal renewable energy sources generation, or when nuclear has enough power to produce electricity and there is no another carbon production in the system. So this is translated to operate the electrolyzers when prices are low. This is the first operation system. What are the main advantages? Is the carbon-free and inexpensive electricity, as it is produced by renewables and nuclear. The main disadvantage is the low operation time and highly variable and predictable regeneration. So as we can see in this graph, this is the generation of hydrogen. So it is not used all the time. So this is translated to low operation time of electrolyzers, which will be an issue for economic reasons, as we will see later on. The second operation mode is in base load. So electrolyzers are going to operate all the time except peak periods. So when the electricity is high, we can switch off electrolyzers. The main advantage is the long operation times of electrolyzers, as they operate almost 95% of the time. And the main disadvantage is the potential impact on CO2 emissions and high electricity supply costs. And I will come back to this later on. And the third operation mode is the coupling of electrolyzers with self-generation. We have chosen a photovoltaic plant. So we are going to produce hydrogen only when the photovoltaic plant is production, sorry. And we are gonna design the electrolyzers to operate in the base part of the production, and all the production that is not used for electrolysis is going to be sold to the electricity market. The main advantage of this operation mode is the limited cost of supply, because we know how much our panels are going to cost us in advance. And the operation times are potentially significant, higher than the first mode, but lower than in the second one. And the main disadvantages are the potential isolated sites, as we're going to put the electrolyzers next to the photovoltaic production, which can be places where the hydrogen demand is not there. So there are questions of how storage, transportation. And also there is sensitive to revenues from electricity sales, as the business model of the operation system depends on how much can we sell our electricity. So this traduces from different electrolysis capacities, needs for storage, load factor, and CO2 impacts. I will analyze I will present some of the results. First, in the technical impacts of the different operation modes. So the power system plan under multi-annual energy plan, we have analyzed that it can accommodate the development of electrolysis with any real difficulty. So this we are in the horizon of 2035. This horizon, the carbon-free electricity generation planned by the French government potential is around 600 terawatt hours, and this is this is enough to meet the electricity consumption of all uses of electricity, plus the mobility consumption of electric vehicles and the electrolysis consumption, which will be roughly 30 terawatt hours at this horizon. Now, this is in terms of energy, but as a TSO, we are very concerned about adequacy, so to meet electricity demand at each second. So our technical analysis of how electrolysis function, it has revealed to us that they have the capability to provide flexibility services to the system for supply-demand balance and for grid operation. We can switch on and off quite fast. But these services, which can be done for the electricity system, could represent an additional source of remuneration. So this alone would not justify the development of electrolysis. So we can see in the right-hand side of the slide, on the low part, we have on the left-hand side of the graph the annual cost for electrolysis, which mainly the electricity supply, the cost associated to the power grid, and the capex of electrolysis facilities. And on the right-hand side, we have the remuneration of different services to the operation system. So these remuneration are lower than the cost. So this is not going to be the main business model of the electrolyzers. It's of course the sale of hydrogen. From an environmental point of view, replacing fossil hydrogen by electrolysis leads to a reduction in CO2 emissions. In France, it has revealed to be true in all scenarios, because the electricity generation in France is to a large extent already carbon-free, and in the foreseen future, with more renewables and still a lot of nuclear, it will be the same. And there will be significant reductions in CO2 emissions in France from 5 to 6 million tons per year. And they come essentially from the substitution of the steam reforming with of carbon-free electricity. In Europe, it's a little different. It is true if the power mix is adapted with more carbon-free generation, because if we produce hydrogen from electricity which has been produced from fossil fuel generation, due to efficiencies and losses, at the end we don't have any interest. So all other things being equal, we can see that in France, if we export carbon-free electricity, appears to be more efficient way to reduce European emissions than replacing steam reforming with electrolysis of water. It's better to export low carbon electricity in order to reduce emissions in Germany, in Poland, or wherever in Europe. But if the carbon-free power mix is developed as well in Europe, the carbon balance is positive at the European scale. Now I will finish with the economic issues. So as we saw in the first presentation, hydrogen costs from electrolysis are higher than from steam reforming. So the cost of transitioning to electrolysis is high, but is justified by the reduction of CO2 emissions. So in our analysis, the cost of hydrogen production by electrolysis goes from €3 per kilogram in the base load scenario up to €7 per kilogram, depending on if we use renewables. So it appears to be higher by 2035 than hydrogen produced by steam reforming, except if CO2 is based on the shallow price of carbon. So if we take CO2 carbon prices, so this can be seen on the left-hand side of the graph. So we have the the steam reforming hydrogen production with a CO2 of €30 the ton. So the production of hydrogen from steam reforming is under €2 per kilogram. But if we take into account an increase of CO2 cost of tons, it can be the cost of hydrogen production can be up to €5 per kilogram. This must be put in comparison of different operation modes. So the cheapest one is the base load operation. So we can operate the electrolysis all the time. So it is easier to pay back the capex, the fixed costs for electrolysis. We have a big part of the cost which are due to the adaptation of the electricity generation mix. Some cost of internal and public networks, and there is no cost of hydrogen storage because we can produce it when demand needed. And then we have the other operation modes, which are a bit different. First one, the operation mode using renewable energy sources. As I said before, we need a lot of electrolyzers in order to accommodate the renewable energy production, which can be quite random. So we are going to have big capex, so big fixed costs for electrolysis. Sorry. There will be as well the cost of hydrogen storage in order to meet the demand. And the positive point of view is that as the electrolyzers are going to operate when prices are low, even negative, there is reducing variable electricity generation costs. At the end, we have the PV self-generation operation mode, which is between the two operation modes. So we are going to have the electrolyzers running less hours than in base load. That's why we have higher fixed costs of electrolyzers, some cost of hydrogen storage, which is going to make this mode a bit more expensive than the base load mode. So you will have all the results on all the details in the different reports that Rathje has published. And just thanks a lot for your attention, and I will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Alberto, also for giving us the background for hydrogen and for making clear this difference between decarbonizing final uses and providing flexibility also to the electricity sector. If I can summarize, but so your scenario is to 2035, and you say that it is somehow quite easy to get that point. So despite all the questions that we actually have regarding the development of this technology, who is going to invest? So you seem to be quite optimistic. Is that because the total amount that is needed in France is low, or it is because of the development of the hydrogen itself, perhaps not only in France, but everywhere?
Well, thanks for your question. It's a very good question. Well, I wouldn't say we see it as optimistic. I would say that we analyze what the government is aiming to achieve in 2030. So France has published its hydrogen strategy plan in 1 year ago, and they have they are going to invest a lot of money to low carbon hydrogen. There is a projected cost of electrolysis that are expected to be reduced in the following years. So for this amount of hydrogen ambitions, which are not that high as in other countries, at least we are analyzing if the electricity system can meet this demand, and what are going to be the impacts on CO2 and the technical implications. I think this part of CO2 emission is important because it is not only to produce hydrogen from electricity without looking at how we are producing electricity. So that's why we made these studies to illustrate the difference of operation the different modes of electrolyzers.
So the idea is you have this target and you see what does it means for the overall energy production and demand in 2035. I see.
Exactly. So the target is given by the government ambitions.
Yeah.
So we analyze what happens if
that's the crucial question. If it realizes at that date.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions or remarks? No, my remark was in that if 2035 is tomorrow, right? So if we want to get there in even I mean in the, let's say, limited needs of France compared to other countries, compared to Germany, we should have seen already something. That's my question behind, but I understand that the trajectory is not in the scope of your study. It's just provided that we have this objective met, how it is going to be split in several usages, and how much it is going to contribute to decarbonize different sectors.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is that even if it comes later, the analysis can be adapted later on as well. So the impacts on the electricity system can be analyzed even if it is not 2030, but it is 2040. At least we have analyzed what happens if we achieve these targets.
Yeah, but there are crucial assumptions on how renewables are going to develop until then, and
Yeah.
also whether the usages, in particular the industrial ones, are going to adapt.
Yeah,
Right? Because
exactly.
it's not something that for their own point of view is not zero cost.
Yeah. And as I presented at the beginning, there is a big part of hydrogen that is used for the production of petrol and diesel.
Yeah.
So if electric vehicles and light vehicles or heavy duty vehicles, they turn to electric or hydrogen, so the demand of petrol is going to go down. So the demand of hydrogen is going to go down. So I think there is also a question there to analyze what are going to be the end uses of hydrogen tomorrow.
Of course, they could switch to gas itself. So it's another assumption, another scenario, let's say.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will have another presentation, by the way, on the same issues. So we'll have the opportunity to continue discussing on that. So let me thank you, Alberto, for your clarity, and I give you the floor to Johannes for the follow-up.
Your mic is off, Johannes. Still off.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Oh, yes.
Now it works.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Yeah, 1 second. Let me just share my screen. Or do you already see it? Yes? Okay, cool. So let me go to full screen then. Okay, so I think it's fine. Can you confirm? Yes, okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So my name is Johannes Brauer, and I'm presenting today some research. The topic is low carbon hydrogen imports to Europe as a pillar to achieve carbon neutrality and economic analysis of potential hydrogen import pathways to 2050. This is a collaborative work that I'm doing together with my colleague Manuel Villavincenzo and Clément Cabot. So I have to mention this right at the beginning. This is still at an early stage of research, so we are grateful for any constructive feedback. Okay, so what is the motivation for this work? Clearly, the European Green Deal sets ambitious climate goals. Reaching carbon neutrality by 2050 requires actions to be taken. And considering that there are only less than 30 years left, indicates that speed really matters. And in the past decade, first emission reductions could be achieved, mainly in the power sector due to the integration of renewable energies. However, it is necessary also to decarbonize sectors where emissions are harder to abate, namely the industrial sector and the transportation sector. And this is where low carbon hydrogen comes into the game due to its chemical characteristic that provides promising possibilities. And as shown in the chart, there are various studies that expect that demand of hydrogen might increase tenfold compared to today's level in long term, 2050. It could contribute to more than 25% on final energy consumption in 2050. Today, it's only at 2%, which highlights again the significant role that lower carbon hydrogen might play in the energy transition. And therefore, an economic efficient supply is fundamental to guarantee the international competitiveness. And as there are still many uncertainties on the availability of sufficient and competitive low carbon hydrogen within the EU, imports from extra EU countries might be important. And this is also why hydrogen imports are foreseen and anchored in the European hydrogen strategy. And furthermore, the improving economics of green hydrogen technologies suggest that there are new possibilities. However, they are still exposed to significant techno-economic and also policy uncertainties. And furthermore, due to its early development stage, green hydrogen technologies still require significant financial support to reach marketability. And those supports, obviously, they should be effective and justifiable. And last but not least, due to the increasing role in the supply of energy, security of supply aspects gain in importance so that the economy does not run the risk of supply interruptions. Okay, so what is the research question? Our research question is, what are the economic drivers for importing low carbon hydrogen to the EU? And there are three key findings of our work. First, the retrofitting of existing natural gas infrastructure is a key lever. Next, favorable exporting countries might require to rapidly scale up green hydrogen production capacities to contribute to the increasing European hydrogen demand that is expected. And last, the risk of high market concentration might raise concerns about security of supply in the future. Okay, so how do we approach the question? We do a quantitative analysis, a modeling framework that consists of a GIS analysis and a linear optimization problem is set up. The mathematical optimization minimizes overall supply costs, and the supply costs consists of three elements: the cost for the production of hydrogen, the cost for the conversion, and also the transportation. And the analysis covers the time horizon from 2030 to 2050. However, this is a static approach that does not consider a link between the individual years. In terms of the geographical scope, we consider hydrogen imports from all parts of the world, as indicated here in this graph. Furthermore, we are applying a volume-based approach for now to estimate hydrogen import demands, meaning that there is a fixed import demand to be supplied independently of the competitiveness of low carbon hydrogen produced within the EU. Okay, so the model that we built is illustrated here in this chart. And yeah, depending on the available resources and the potential export countries, we consider either the production of green hydrogen from solar PV, onshore wind, or hybrid systems, or the production of blue hydrogen from natural gas through the stream method reforming that is combined with carbon capture and storage. The production of low carbon hydrogen is associated with costs that depend on the availability of the resources. And then hydrogen is transported via pipeline to the exporting point. And from the exporting point, it is then further transported to the border of the European Union, either via seaborne transport or via pipeline transport, if this is available. And once the hydrogen is landed inside the EU, it is distributed to the individual countries to supply their demands. Okay, so how do we use this model to answer the question? What is the methodology behind? We use a two-step approach. In the first step, we set up a base case scenario. And in the second step, we then conduct a sensitivity analysis on a variety of input parameters and confront it to the base case. So what are the key parameters of the base case? For the hydrogen downstream, we assume that 50% of the demand stated in the Hydrogen for Europe study would need to be supplied via imports. The cost of midstream technologies, which includes the conversion process, are set on the average cost projections that are found in the literature. And with respect to pipeline transport to the EU and within the EU, we consider the retrofitting timeline of existing natural gas pipelines according to the European Hydrogen Backbone Study. This is a study that projects potential evolution of a dedicated hydrogen pipeline network within the EU. So most European gas TSOs have been involved in the study. On the upstream side, the parameters linked to the production of green hydrogen correspond to the average values found in the literature. Additionally, we set a cap on the availability of renewable energies for the production of green hydrogen exports in the potential export countries to mimic a limit of the development of the local renewable industry. And this limit is set to the average global PV and onshore capacity addition between 2050 and 2019. And those values have been corrected by the GDP per capita to account for the strengths of the local economy. And they also have been corrected by the exploitation of exportation trajectory to reach carbon emission targets in 2015, and so to also account for the domestic decarbonization in the exporting countries. And this economic potential that we use here might differ significantly from the technical one. Parameters linked to the production of blue hydrogen. So natural gas prices were taken from the global gas market model, and the availability of natural gas as a feedstock is set to a limit of 25% of the historical trade with respective trade partner countries in 2018. So that's the key parameters of the base case. In the second step, we then apply sensitivity analysis on a number of parameters. We introduce a lower and a higher value. On the downstream side, we set the import shares to 25% in the lower case and 75% in the higher case of the demand projections. Sensitivity on the pipeline retrofitting applies to its time when it gets available. In the lower case, retrofitting pipelines are available 5 years earlier. In the higher case, they are delayed by 5 years. And the higher and the lower value of the transportation costs as well as the production costs are set to the lower and the upper ranges found in the literature. And the availability of natural gas feedstock in the lower case is set to 0. So there's no natural gas available for blue hydrogen production, and the higher and in the higher case, it's set to 50% of the historical trade volumes. Again, the reference case here, the reference year is 2018. And the availability of renewable energies from green hydrogen export is decreased in the lower case to only half of that what was possible in the base case. And in the higher case, it is set to a maximum capacity of PV onshore and onshore wind observed between 2015 and 2019. So this was China. And again, the values are adjusted according to the GDP per capita to account for the local strengths of the economy. And the individual sensitivities are then analyzed with respect to the hydrogen supply costs and the hydrogen supply structure. So the set of exporting countries, the upstream and the midstream pathways. Okay, so let's go then to the results of the base case. I'm presenting here the supply on the left side, the supply structure, on the right side, the prices. On the Sankey graph on the top, we see the supply structure in 2030. And what we can see is that all hydrogen produced in 2030 comes from natural gas. Consequently, green hydrogen is not competitive in this case. Furthermore, we see that blue hydrogen is only produced in 4 countries, with an exception of Qatar. They are all neighbors of the EU. And the transport of blue hydrogen to Europe takes almost entirely place via seaborne transport. Only a really small portion is transported via pipeline from Algeria to Italy. And in 2015, the supply structure looks very different. Now there's about 60% of hydrogen produced from renewables, so PV onshore, but also hybrid systems. And also the set of exporting countries is much bigger now. The number increased from 4 to 22. There are countries which are in close proximity to the EU, but there are also countries that are far more distant, such as Australia and Chile. What we can also see is that the share of pipeline imports increased. However, it remains still at a minor level of about 20%. In terms of cost, the supply cost curve is relatively steep in 2030. €1.60 is the lowest price. This corresponds to the pipeline imports from Algeria, and the highest price for the maximum volume of about 15 MTPU is at about €3 per kilogram. In 2013, the prices decreases. So the lowest values are at about €1.20, and to supply all the volumes at 53 MTPU, the cost would rise to about €3.15. Okay, now let's go over to the sensitivities. I first present the key results with respect to the supply costs. Those results are illustrated here in this table. The table on the top shows the average weighted supply costs for the base case in the year 2030, 40, and 50. The table on the bottom represents the relative change in average weighted supply costs compared to the base case. And what we see is that when the availability of competitive EU hydrogen decreases and hence the import share increases, the average prices in mid and long term increases, and the other way around. This basically corresponds to a shift on the supply curve. What we also see is that costs associated to the transportation have only a minor impact on the overall supply costs. However, the availability of retrofitted infrastructure is important. The sooner the pipeline is available, the more competitive the hydrogen is. And then changes on the natural gas prices have only minor impact on the overall supply cost. However, they cause an offset. This could either be positive or negative. And then what we also see is that a slower decrease in costs of green hydrogen technologies compared to the base case decreases competitiveness of hydrogen imports. And whereas faster cost reduction cause lower supply costs. The availability of natural gas for the production of blue hydrogen has a significant impact on the supply costs. An increasing availability increases the competitiveness of imports, while a decreasing availability has a significant decreasing effect. And the availability of renewables, what we see here is that when countries are able to install more renewables than the average observed in the past years, the competitiveness of the imported hydrogen increases due to a growing utilization of the pipeline infrastructure. So those two things are really important here. Okay, so now let's go over to some other key results that I want to present here. So this is the impact of the sensitivities on the set of exporting countries. We use the Herfindahl-Hirschman index that gives indications on the market concentration to describe how the set of exporting countries changed. And the results show that are shown here in the table. However, this time they are not represented in a relative change compared to the base case. This time they're illustrated in an absolute values. The base case is represented here on the top line. And in all cases, we see that there is a relatively high market concentration in short term. So that means that there's only a few countries that supply significant volumes. However, the market concentration decreases over time. So this is indicated by the green colors. And that is true for all the sensitivities. Now I only want to point out a few spots. The first one is here. If competitiveness of green hydrogen increases in Europe, then the market concentration of imports also increases significantly, so indicated here by the red color. Consequently, the set of exporting countries reduces. Furthermore, on the previous slide, we saw that the availability of natural gas and renewable energies has a significant impact on prices. And this is also what we see here. They also have significant impacts on the concentration of the export countries. Higher availability of resources in exporting countries increase the market concentration, and hence it decreases the set of exporting countries. Therefore, resulting decreasing supply costs could cause higher market concentration. In the case of higher availability of renewable energy. So the last line, we see that the optimization shows that major green hydrogen volumes would be imported from North Africa, namely Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco, as well as from Turkey and the Ukraine. And obviously the political stability of those countries, as well as partially their relationship to the EU, might be challenged. And this, of course, increased market concentration. This increased market concentration could raise some concerns about security of supply. Okay, so to conclude, we found that the repurposing of the existing natural gas infrastructure is a key lever for increasing competitiveness of hydrogen imports. This suggests that long-term planning for the usage of natural gas infrastructure is essential. And this would also contribute to mitigating the risk of stranded assets in the natural gas sector in the coming decades. Furthermore, repurposing decisions require then also to engage with the connected exporting countries in partnerships to develop corresponding widespread exploration of renewable energies, and hence to ensure sufficient economic utilization of the dedicated infrastructure. Therefore, potential partnerships with involved non-EU countries should be established soon, so that private investments in hydrogen production facilities can develop to ensure a timely creation of cross-border hydrogen trade that contributes to the ambitious climate emission targets. Yes. Yes. Is there a question? Or
I don't know if it was just me, but if you could repeat, yes, I think it's me. If you can repeat.
From where? Okay, so yeah, the partnership. So retrofitting is a
little bit more loudly, because I mean we lost some points. To me, yes. After the partnership, so financial support, your third bullet point.
Okay. Yeah, so financial support might be needed in extra EU countries to kickstart development of green hydrogen production and to build up local industries that can cope with the required speed to contribute to both the domestic and the EU energy transition. Furthermore, it is important that a low carbon hydrogen might take place in an economic sustainable manner, also to ensure that local acceptance is given. It might be necessary to introduce measures such as local content requirements to guarantee that the domestic economy benefits also from the export. And lastly, we found that the supply structure of exporting countries might be highly concentrated, and that raises concerns with respect to the security of supply. Therefore, measures might be needed to widening the set of exporting countries. However, this is likely to result in a decreasing competitiveness of low carbon hydrogen. So that is all. Thank you very much. And I'm now happy to get any feedback and questions.
Thank you very much. So a very interesting issue. What I did discover personally is the importance of sea transport. I didn't realize that it was, especially in the let's say medium term, taking such an important share of the exchanges. Perhaps because the actual debate is, as you also mentioned, is to understand whether there is a potential for hydrogen to go through the existing pipelines. But as you showed, this is a scenario that is not the first one. So, Franziska, you have a question.
I have exactly a follow-up question on that topic. I was also surprised by your result that you only have one significant pipeline trade flow. So I was wondering if that is based on your assumptions, or do you
Exactly.
Do you allow for example, hydrogen flows from Russia, which is today one of our biggest gas flow by pipeline, or is it a cost-based issue? What's the driver of that result?
No, it's a capacity-based issue. So we allow for pipeline transports and imports from Russia, but according to the backbone study, to the second version of the backbone study, there is only a limited link between Russia and the EU. So there's only a link, I think, to Finland. So initially there was one of the two Nord Stream pipelines that was supposed to be retrofitted, but I'm not sure if this. So they, yeah, no. So
I think I'm on the same page as your assumptions there.
Yeah. So this is clearly based on the capacity limits. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
I think I've seen another question from the audience. Kimon?
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. Interesting presentation, and I have questions a bit in the similar direction about pipelines. I understand that your conclusions is that we could make use of the existing infrastructure. However, have you considered any technical limitations as to the use of these pipelines in terms of hydrogen has different density, you might need more pumps to keep a constant pressure in the exports, and also when we are talking about pipeline gas transport, we're really talking about big volumes. Yeah. Russia was mentioned, and you would need really significant volumes of hydrogen to make use of that export infrastructure directly. And if I may, also a second question, I understand that you built these supply cost curves essentially of non-EU supply. How about EU domestic supply? How does that match compared to this? And can we expect this to be within the margin of error or leaks from pipelines or transformation processes, making thus EU domestic production close to these non-EU supply costs?
Yes. Okay. Thanks for your questions. To first approach the first one. So we consider that from an energy perspective, the energy content that can be transported in the retrofitted natural gas pipeline is the same as the one in the original natural gas pipeline. So we found some sources that state this could be possible, but so the capacity volumes we took from N2G, and we applied a 75% of capacity factor on those values, just to account for some availabilities and utilization. And then with regards to additional compressor station and more technical details, so here we assume that they are considered in the cost of the transport. So yeah, so we're just assuming that they are already considered additional equipment. It's already considered in the costs basically. I hope that answers a little bit your first question, and then with regards to the second one, yes, for now we are only focusing on extra EU countries, but the idea is actually to expand this and to also include the European hydrogen production capacities, and to contrast basically both in order to have not a volume-based demand. Rather, we would like to have a price-based demand for imports, so that we basically have the imports contrasted to the European production, and then see, okay, how competitive are the different options, and then we get also a better view on how much hydrogen imports are actually needed. And it is likely to see that there is, in the end, not a lot of seaborne transport that remains, because it adds just significant costs to the overall supply costs.
Thank you very much, Johannes, for the presentation and the answer to the questions. We now switch to the last presentation, Marie-Alix. She will come back again to some scenarios to now 2050, I think.
Yes, exactly. So I'm going. All right, can you see well?
Yes.
All right. So can you see it in a full presentation mode or just the PDF?
Full screen.
Yes.
Okay, great. So my name is Marie-Alix Dupré-Latour. I'm a PhD student at RTE, the French TSO, and also at the CIRED, which is a French lab of economics. My director is Philippe Thirion, and I'm going to show you here a presentation of the impact of sector coupling on prices, which is some work that we've done with Virginie Dussart at RTE. So as you all know, the European Commission published a Clean Planet for All in 2018, and each member country had to decline it in a national strategy. So the French one was the SNBC recently, and actually most of the strategies involve electrification and decarbonization of electricity, but we're not going to electrify the whole energy system. So we need to decarbonize the other energy vectors as well. And actually these energy vectors can be very useful to the electricity vector because they can bring flexibility. Therefore, many studies about sector coupling and cross-vector integration developed. So for example, I'm citing several ones. Some study the combination of heat and power, some study power and transport, heat, power and transports, and some of them actually study all sectors together. So we can cite Blanco, Pavicevic, that use times. We've got Brown as well, and more recently Shirazadeh. But this last one was only based in France, so it wasn't including the other European countries. So here in this study, we're going to focus on power to hydrogen, the electrolysis and methanation actually. And we are going to compare three modes that are going to be kind of a reminding of what Alberto presented earlier in the morning. But we are going to be situated in 2050. And so as the electricity part between the three modes is going to be the same. It's an 85% of renewable scenario of what Alberto mentioned earlier, the RTE generation adequacy report that is in process. So it's the current state of this report. And so that's for the electricity part. We've got each country in Europe that is represented. And for the hydrogen and methane part, we've got data from the French national strategy, low carbon strategy for France. And abroad, we've got the TYNDP, apart from countries that already have a hydrogen and gas strategy for 2050. And so the differences between the three modes are going to be the following. First, we have the marginal and base modes that are kind of stakeholders' behaviors, as Alberto said earlier. So the marginal model would be operated, so it's electrolysis operated when electricity prices are very low, so between lower than 30 euros per megawatt hour. And so this is an operation during periods of low prices and carbon neutrality. So here on the right part of the the screen, you can see the electricity part, which has got load, supply, storage, and electrical interconnection. But the hydrogen part does not have all this. It only takes the electricity prices and actually influences them and produces hydrogen whenever the electricity prices are below 30 euros per megawatt hour. The base model actually works kind of the same because it's also taking the electricity prices and actually influencing them. But this is for prices below 250 euros per megawatt hour. So it's actually during kind of the whole year, it's producing hydrogen. So this allows for a large number of operating hours in order to make the investment cost of the electrolyzers profitable. But this model, this modeling does not want to penalize the electricity system too much. So whenever the prices are higher than 250 euros per megawatt hour, sorry, this it actually cuts off. And in order to get approximately the same amount of electricity converted to hydrogen for these two modes, operating modes, we have determined a different electrolysis capacity. So the electrolysis capacity is lower in the base mode than in the marginal mode. So these are, as we said, these are two stakeholders' behaviors. The multi-energy model is quite different because it's more a difference in modeling. So here we can see that differing from the previous modes, we've got a real representation of the hydrogen and the methane systems. So the hydrogen has a load to satisfy. It has got a supply, different supplies apart from electrolysis and steam reforming. Extra supply providers. It's got storage as well, and but here we did not represent the interconnections of hydrogen, and we are supposing an infinite grid. It's actually the same for gas. We've got a load, a supply, a storage, and no interconnection, like an infinite grid. And so we can, yes, as I said, we can do steam reforming from gas in order to produce hydrogen. We can have electrolysis, methanation, well, actually the transformation from electricity to methane, which is electrolysis plus methanation. And we've got also a retro influence because electricity can be made from gas, and the gas system knows it. It's not just on the electricity part. It consumes gas whenever the CCGT and OCGT work for the electricity system. So first we're going to, yes, so sorry, I'm showing here just the profiles of these three modes. So on the lower part of the slide, you can see that the base model, this is an average of 10 years of simulation. But yeah, you can see that it has got a lower capacity than the other modes, and it's producing kind of the whole year. Whereas the marginal model is fluctuating much more. It's got a higher capacity and it's producing, well, as the base mode, it's producing much more in summer than in winter. The base mode is actually cutting off only in winter. And the multi-energy model here, well, it can distinguish methanation from electrolysis, and it actually has the same profile than the marginal model because it's an optimization of the full system, and therefore it wants to produce hydrogen during periods of low prices of electricity. And so if you look on the upper part, this is the profile, but this is I mean the weekly profile, the weekly volume, and yeah, we can see that the profile of the marginal and multi-energy modes are pretty much the same. So first, we're going to have a look at the impact on the prices of these three different modeling. So we're showing the monotone, so the Christian prices of in France, of the French. I'm sorry, this is the monotone of French electricity prices over 1 year with the three different modes. So first, we can have a look at the base curve, which is the blue one. And we can see very easily that there is much more hours with 0 or negative prices. It's approximately 2,700 hours with very low prices. This is due to the the lower electrolysis capacity in this mode. As I said, we want the same volume produced throughout the year, and therefore we need to have a fewer capacity in the base mode. And this implies that when there is curtailment, it cannot be, the curtailment in the electricity system cannot go all to the hydrogen system in order to operate the electrolyzers and produce hydrogen, because there is not as much capacity as for the other modes. So it's not enough to just take all the curtailment. And we can see that very easily in the average curtailment in terawatt hour here on the three modes, the base, marginal, multi-energy modes. We've got much more curtailment in the base mode than in the other modes. Then we've got here a nuclear plateau. So we actually fixed the nuclear price at 27 euros per megawatt hour. So this is not a theoretical value, absolutely not a theoretical value. It's more a kind of a water value approach. So we fix the price in order to replicate the historical production, the historical production. So yes, so we can see the nuclear plateau here. And then we've got several plateaus here that are the gas prices. So we can see that the gas prices are intervening much before the two other modes. And this is due to the fact that we have this extra load on every time step due to the base profile, this extra load to satisfy. So during many time steps, we need to fire the gas generation. And then we've got this plateau here at 250 euro per megawatt hour. So this is when electrolysis is cut off, actually. So the cutoff of electrolysis gives, sets the prices during 1,000 hours of the year. And then more quickly, we can have a look at the other modes. So as I said, the gas generation, the different plateaus here, appear much later in the year, in the hours, in the monotone. And here for the marginal mode, we have these plateaus for 27 and 30 euros per megawatt hour. So the 27 was for the nuclear, whereas the 30 is set by the maximum price for electrolysis. And then the multi-energy curve, we can see that it's much smoother than for the other modes. And we are going to see that this is because the hydrogen and methane systems set prices too. So I'm showing here simplified quantity price curve. So as from an electricity perspective, and it's for the multi-energy model. So here you've got the different generation, electricity generation. We've got the renewables, nuclear, hydro, and CCGT. So it's very simplified. And what we can see is that, renewables cannot move, but the arrows show that nuclear, hydro, and CCGT can move due to the level of storage. For example, for hydro, you know that when the hydro reservoir is kind of empty, we want to actually spare energy, and we don't want to turbinate the energy too easily. So we are going to value the water that we've got in the reservoir kind of with a high price. Whereas when the reservoir is really full, it's okay to turbinate it for a lower price. All right, so it's actually the same for CCGT because it depends on the level of gas, and actually same for the nuclear, because we've got some nuclear fuel that needs to be, you don't want to operate it too easily. It depends on the level of storage, nuclear fuel storage. And then from a demand perspective, we've got the specific electricity demand that needs to be satisfied with an unsupplied energy cost here. And as I said, from an electricity perspective, we've got two plateaus here for hydrogen and CH4 demand that are at a price that fluctuates throughout the year. That here is the hydrogen price multiplied by the efficiency for electrolysis, and here it's the same with the additional efficiency for methanation. And this fluctuates because, of course, the hydrogen price and the methane price fluctuate. And so actually this curve shows that depending on the level of stock of each different energy, the curve can be different. And here you can see that maybe the stock of gas is really full, so we can turbinate it easily, and therefore the prices lowers. And actually this shows that depending of the level of stock of a different energy, so the value of these different plateaus, this multi-energy model can choose which stock it wants to use at each moment of the year. So it's quite important because the hydrogen and gas demand set prices of the electricity here with the intersection between supply and demand. All right, and then this has impacts on the production mix of the different models. So we're going to focus here on CCGT and a bit on batteries and injection of electric vehicles. So first, well, we've seen that before, but in the base mode, the CCGT are much more used than in the two other modes. And this is due to this extra load that we need to satisfy on every time step of the year. Due to, yes, the constant, the steady hydrogen demand, again, kind of the steady profile that we need to satisfy. So yes, So here I'm showing the difference between the base mode in the upper part and the marginal mode in the lower part. And on the left part, we've got supply plus imports, and on the right part, demand plus exports. And we can see easily that we need here, whenever there is not too much renewable production, we need to generate electricity from gas at a steady level in order to fulfill the steady power to hydrogen. Right? That is in orange on the right part here. Whereas for the marginal mode, when there is not enough renewables, we just do not produce hydrogen, and therefore we only operate gas generation when there is a need. So it's just right here and right here when there is a need for the specific electricity demand. We do not want to operate the gas for hydrogen. And what is not very well seeable here is the fact that for the marginal mode, we've got 13% more CCGT production than for the multi-energy mode. And this is because the multi-energy sees the system as a whole and sees the fact that there is not, I mean, it's not interesting for the system to have all the efficiency that to lose energy to produce to produce methanation at noon and then to burn the gas in the evening. You don't have an interesting efficiency. So I'm sure it's going to be more visible here, but you know, I mean. Here we're burning gas here and right here, and it was just gas that we had produced right before here on the right part and there. And the multi-energy system sees that this is not interesting. It's more interesting to use more vehicle to grid. And so it doesn't use the gas at all during this period. And I mean, instead, it uses more batteries and vehicle to grid. So, as I said, the multi-energy modeling is much more interesting for. I mean, it represents the system better, and it's got important impacts on prices and production volumes, as we have seen. And what is quite interesting and that we could not have seen before is the fact that from an electricity price perspective, hydrogen and methane demand prices are becoming important in price formation. So this was quite new. And that in this multi-energy modeling, what is also interesting is that we can see all the levels of the different stocks of all the energy types, and therefore we can choose which stock we want to use at which moment. And for future work, we are at the moment improving hydrogen and methane modeling. For example, the hydrogen grid could be very important and determinant for the results. So we're working on that, and also on multi-stocks management. And at the moment, we're also working with the CEA, a French institute, in order to add district heating to the model. All right, thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. We see that going into the details of the impact of hydrogen becomes more and more complex. Just a quick question. There are a lot of assumptions, but regarding CO2 prices, you included them in the cost of different technologies?
Yes, exactly.
And you have a specific value? Going back to the first presentation that has shown very important welfare impacts depending on the level of CO2 prices.
If I'm remembering well, we are using the IAEA price. Oh, I'm not remembering well. I think it's, sorry.
Well, it doesn't matter, but yeah, you just included them in the full cost of different technologies,
yes.
right?
Yes. Well, we don't have full cost here. We're not including
at the margin. Yeah, of course.
The operational,
the ones that set.
which is actually limits. But I think it was approximately 100 euro, if I'm not mistaken, 100 euro per ton. I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
But it's included.
Other questions or remarks? Yes, Franziska, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I have a very, let's say, beginner's question. You confronted those two modes in addition to your multi-energy model where you have base load versus sort of marginal running load of the electrolyzers. Are both modes equally feasible technically? What do electrolyzer producers or operators tell you? Are we still uncertain which mode is working better, and this is why you chose those scenarios?
Thank you for your question. So actually, the question is more what are the stakeholders going to be willing to do? I mean, both modes are feasible. I'm sorry, you were citing the marginal and what was the other one?
And the base.
The base, yes, that's what. Yeah. Actually, both are feasible. It's just as Alberto said, and I don't know if you were here the presentation, but both are feasible. It's just a difference of between prices, between CO2 emissions, between we are trying to investigate both of them because we don't want what the stakeholders want to do and what the the national strategies may invite them to do. Like actually the national or European institution can influence them and actually say, oh, well, we're happy to help to subsidize the electrolyzers, but we want you to operate it this way because it's helping more the electoral system or something, right? But both are feasible from an electrolyzer perspective. I don't think I was clear enough.
Thank you very much. I think that the full presentation raised most questions that what we have discussed, but there will be room during the conference to go back again on this topic. But you will find hydrogen in the gas sessions as well as the dual plenary. So I look forward to our future discussion. And thank you everybody for joining this session, and thanks to the presenters.
Thank you very much, Sol. Have a good day and enjoy.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.